One wrong cut, a single slip of the knife into the wrong organ, and the meal you are about to eat will kill you within hours, and there is no antidote. For over a century, Japan has allowed only around 300 licensed chefs in the entire country to prepare this fish, because the alternative was a death toll that threatened to become routine. So who are these chefs, and why does anyone still eat it? Part 1. The city that built its identity around poison. On the southwestern tip of Japan's main island, where the Kanmon Strait narrows to barely 600 meters of churning water, sits the city of Shimonoseki. It is not a famous city by any conventional measure, but among those who know Japanese food culture at its deepest level, Shimonoseki is considered sacred ground, because this is where Japan decided to make peace with one of the most dangerous fish in the ocean. The fish is called Fugu. In English, it is known as pufferfish or blowfish, a name that sounds almost comical until you learn what lives inside it. Fugu carries tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin roughly 1,200 times more lethal than cyanide, concentrated primarily in its liver, ovaries, intestines, and skin. The toxin does not announce itself with bitterness or a burning sensation. It works silently, blocking sodium channels in nerve cells, causing progressive paralysis. First, the lips and tongue go numb, then the limbs, then the muscles of the chest wall. Death, when it comes, is by asphyxiation. The body stops breathing, while the mind remains, for a time, entirely conscious. And yet, Shimonoseki, which handles the majority of Japan's fugu trade, processing thousands of tons of the fish every year at its iconic Heidomari market, did not shy away from this animal. It built a civic identity around it. There are fugu lanterns strung across streets, fugu statues near the port, a fugu museum, hotels that serve fugu banquets as though the fish were a trophy, not a threat. The city's relationship with the pufferfish is not one of nervous tolerance. It is one of deep, almost defiant pride. That pride did not emerge from nowhere. It was shaped by history, by loss, and by a legal system that decided, at enormous cost, that the solution to a deadly fish was not to ban it, but to create the most rigorous culinary licensing regime ever built around a single ingredient. But here's where it gets even darker, because Japan didn't always have that system. For a long time, it had nothing, and the death toll was catastrophic. Part 2. The era of unregulated eating, and how many died. Fugu has been consumed in Japan for at least 2,000 years. Archaeological evidence, shells and bones found in ancient kaizuka, the shell mounds left by prehistoric communities, suggest that coastal populations were preparing pufferfish long before any written record existed. For most of that history, knowledge of how to handle the fish was passed informally, from fisher to fisher, from cook to cook, through apprenticeship and hard-learned instinct. The problem was that instinct is fallible, and tetrodotoxin forgives nothing. During the Meiji era, as Japan modernized and urban populations grew, fugu-related deaths increased to a frequency that alarmed authorities. In 1882, the Meiji government banned the consumption of fugu outright in parts of the country, a prohibition that persisted in various regions for decades. Famously, the ban did not apply to Shimonoseki, with the same rigid enforcement it received elsewhere, in part because the city's fishing economy depended so heavily on the catch. Tradition held that when Prime Minister Ito Hirobumi visited the region in 1888 and was served fugu during a storm that kept fresh fish off the boats, he found it so extraordinary that he personally advocated for its regulated availability. Whether the story is literal or apocryphal, it carried political weight, and Yamaguchi Prefecture moved toward legitimizing what its residents had never truly stopped doing. The deaths continued. Official records from the 20th century suggest hundreds of fatalities across Japan's coastal regions, with peaks following certain festivals and celebrations where fugu was served by cooks who were skilled but not trained to the level the fish demanded. Even now, the occasional fatality occurs, and almost always, investigators find the same cause. The liver, or the ovaries, had not been fully removed, or the skin had been prepared incorrectly. In every case, what killed the diner was not ignorance of the fish's danger. It was the assumption that partial knowledge was sufficient. And this is where the story changes completely, because the Japanese government's response to decades of preventable deaths was not to ban the fish permanently, it was to build something unprecedented. Part 3. The examination that most chefs fail. To become a licensed fugu chef in Japan, a candidate must pass a 3-part examination administered by the prefectural government. It begins with a written test covering the biology of fugu, the specific organs that carry the highest concentrations of toxin, and the precise regulations governing preparation, storage, and disposal. The written test alone eliminates a large proportion of candidates. Those who pass advance to an identification test, one of the strangest examinations in the culinary world. The candidate is presented with a selection of fish species and must correctly identify which are fugu and which are not, distinguishing between multiple fugu varieties, some of which are safe and some of which are not. There are approximately 38 species of pufferfish in Japanese waters. Not all are equally toxic. Several are considered safe to consume in full. Others carry lethal concentrations in their muscle flesh as well as their organs. Misidentification is not merely a failing grade. It is, in the context the test is simulating, a death sentence for a diner. The final stage is the practical examination. The candidate is given a whole fugu and must break it down completely, removing, isolating, and disposing of every toxic organ with surgical precision, then preparing the remaining flesh according to the standards required for service. The examining officials watch every cut. The disposal of the toxic parts is verified. The finished preparation is evaluated for quality. In Osaka, until regulations were revised, this examination had a reported failure rate of roughly 70%. The figure varies by prefecture, but the underlying truth does not. This is among the most demanding technical tests that exists in the cooking profession anywhere in the world. Chefs who pass do not simply receive a certificate and return to work. They enter a tradition. Many will spend years, sometimes a decade, working only on fugu, developing a relationship with the fish that goes beyond technical competence into something closer to reverence. In Shimonoseki, the most senior fugu chefs speak of the fish with a quality of attention that resembles the way a surgeon might describe a particularly complex anatomy. Not fear, but profound, continuous respect. But here's the part that stops you, because the dish those chefs are ultimately creating, after all that training, all that danger, is almost unbearably delicate. Part 4. What eating fugu actually feels like. The paradox at the center of fugu's story is this. After everything, the toxin, the testing, the licensing system, the centuries of death, what ends up on the plate is extraordinarily subtle. Not bold, not overwhelming, subtle. Fugu sashimi, called tessa in the Kansai dialect, is typically sliced so thin that diners can see the blue and white pattern of the serving plate through it. The flesh is nearly translucent. Because of fugu's low fat content and dense muscle structure, the fish inflates using water, not air, requiring significant muscular effort. The texture is firm, almost resistant, with a delicacy that Japanese food culture describes as teppo, clean, precise, unembellished. The flavor is mild, to the point where a less attentive palate might find it plain. What many diners describe as distinctly unusual, however, is a subtle tingling sensation on the lips and tongue, particularly when eating certain parts of the fish prepared by certain methods. This is tetrodotoxin in concentrations far below dangerous levels, present in trace amounts in the skin and flesh even after proper preparation. Whether this tingle is real or partly psychosomatic is a question food scientists have debated. What is not debated is that diners report it consistently. Some find it unsettling, Others, particularly those who have eaten fugu many times, describe it as the quiet signature of the fish, proof, in a way, that what they are eating is real, that the danger was real, that the training was real. In Shimonoseki, the full fugu experience, a multi-course kaiseki-style meal built entirely around the fish, including the hot pot preparation called tekiri, the grilled fins steeped in hot sake called hirezake, and the rice porridge made from the cooking broth, can cost several $100s per person. The price is not for the fish alone, it is for the years that preceded its preparation, for the examinations failed and retaken, for the lineage of knowledge that runs from the ancient shell mounds to a white-coated chef in a spotless kitchen in a city that built its whole identity around a single, impossible ingredient. And that brings us to the question that this fish has always been asking, not of its chefs, but of us. There is a concept in Japanese aesthetics called mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness that beautiful things are impermanent and that their beauty is inseparable from their fragility. It is most often applied to cherry blossoms, which bloom for barely a week before they fall. But it applies equally to fugu. The fish is dangerous, that cannot be softened. People have died eating it, and the knowledge required to serve it safely took centuries and real lives to accumulate. And yet Japan did not eliminate it. It did not decide that safety required the end of the tradition. Instead, it created a system of such rigor that the danger became the discipline became the art, and the art became a form of cultural memory, preserved in the hands of around 300 people who spend their careers reminding us that the most profound human experiences have always lived closest to the edge. To eat fugu in Shimonoseki is not to be reckless. It is to accept, for one meal, the full weight of what it means to trust another person completely, and to understand that trust, at its deepest, is always an act of faith in someone else's years of invisible work. The fish will numb your lips, and for a moment, at a lacquered table in a city built on the sea, you will feel exactly where the line between life and beauty runs.